Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host, Tyler Schatz, who thankfully lost his invite to Edmure's wedding. Joining me this fine recording session are one Stephen Howard.
The accountant of the Lannisters who has no debts to pay.
Amanda Howard.
I got my invite for the wedding, but I didn't quite make it in time.
Nick Castillo.
Closer you get, the more you worry that you're going to be too late.
And the one and only Gary Delaney.
I think Ygritte is misunderstood and she's trying to communicate her feelings.
Yes.
I'm so confused.
Okay. Well,
I had to quickly grab a note and I was like, I don't got anything funny. Sorry. She just needs to communicate her feelings.
Expecting something funny or absolutely obscene, and instead I get something about Ygritte being misunderstood.
Just wants to communicate her feelings.
Like Gary was saying, she's communicating her feelings, and I thought for a second he meant to say his own personal hero there, not Ygritte.
There you go.
The hero of the revolution, he's a complex character. We haven't dug into why he is the way he is.
and we'll get to that. But for now, we are discussing Season 3, Episode 9, The Reigns of Castamere. Robb and Catelyn arrive at the twins for the wedding. Jon is put to the test to see where his loyalties truly lie. Bran's group decides to split up, and Daenerys plans an invasion of Yunkai. So, before we get into discussing anything, I figured I would just kind of point this out here. There's a big part that talks about the wedding of Edmure happens in this episode. So I'm going to ask if anyone has anything else to discuss before we kind of deal with anything about the Starks from this episode here.
I think we all have at least one.
So we all have at least one. So, Steven, you're the talker. You get to go first.
All right, so I'm going to start off with there is a scene towards the beginning of this episode with Robb and his mother, where Robb is looking over battle plans and telling his mother all this, and his mother goes, well, why are you telling me this? Didn't you want to shit me out? And he's like, I didn't listen to you once, and you had good advice, so now I'm asking your plans on this. And it's like I feel like he's trying to make like a vindication moment for his mom, and I'm just sitting here going, this is I'm not a huge fan of this at all. And it also continues to talk about Robb's plan to go and sack Casterly Rock, which Robb even admits the only reason he's doing it is just for looks, so that the Lannisters don't appear as good or as immortal as they are portrayed to be. And I harped about this last episode. I just don't see the military applications of this raid. I don't see the any sort of, I guess, benefit from this other than like a very temporary sort of thing. And I think it could lead to, obviously doesn't end up leading to any problems, but if it had happened, it could have.
I was going to say that it had a weird... That Robb and his mom had a weird connection when Stephen mentioned it between what's the guy with the Lady of Flames? Stannis and the Red Woman, because Stannis didn't listen to the Red Woman about taking the Red Woman with her to Butcher Bay.
No, Blackwater
Bay?
Blackwater Bay. I'm effing up names of things like I've already started. I thought that was a weird connection when Steven mentioned it, of like, oh yeah, like so another king, one of the 5 kings, like regretted not listening to his advisors. And yeah, that's all I had to Tyler.
So yeah, I definitely agree. There is that connection there between those two, and definitely it's really weird to now Robb all of a sudden like, I'm going to forgive you, mother, and now listen to your advice because you were right one time. But also, too, and I don't know if anyone else caught this thing here, if you look at the map that is laid out with all of the figures on the map there, you're led to believe that the Stark army has this large force of troops there, possibly if they have the twins. But really, it's foreshadowing to, again, what we're going to talk about later on here, is the Lannister army is really actually, or not the Lannister, sorry, the Stark family is really actually surrounded by enemies, and they don't even realize it.
My point was to that as well, the map and talking with his mother, all the excellent points that you all have mentioned. But just, yeah, like he kept saying too, like, if Frey cooperates, if Frey is on our side, then we have this strong force. But over and over again, like they said, he's not to be trusted. And the last thing they did was spit in his face when, they said several times in that episode, he wanted a king and he gets Edmure. Like, he's already jaded, and anyone observing just a third-party observation can tell that he's not going to be pleased, as we find out when he arrives in court.
I guess I have a kind of a double observation here, and that's this entire scene felt almost forced. The reconnecting with his mother felt forced to me to an extent. There was no reason for it to happen. I don't believe there was... if he was going to make up that mind that his mother actually had some good advice, he would have done it before. And then I also felt like just the idea of, and I know this happens in the book too, but actually going to the phrase and all that it feels forced to me as well. Maybe it was, I can see that a little bit more. That's just a genius tactician as a kid, never having made an error and now making the last error.
Oh, I was going to say that when you mentioned, I didn't even catch that. That was a good observation about the map, because the tokens that they have are the flayed man of the Boltons. The towers, the two towers, I'm guessing, are the Freys. What other... Was there a Tully fish in there?
The Lannisters from Casterly Rock and also from King's Landing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is interesting now that you mentioned that how they broke the tokens down. They didn't break it down for each of Robb's bannermen. They specifically just showed the flayed man and the phrase. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of others there, so I think they wanted us to notice those were their forces.
You suppose when you're an important enough bannerman, you just come with your own war tokens? You're like, I'm important. I'm like the Umbers come with these like little bear bear chess pieces, and the
just spawn on the map if you're important enough.
Yeah, exactly.
I have this many forces represented by this many tokens.
Why are you carving a Tyler-shaped token?
Oh, that's something for us to think about. What would be our tokens if we were each forces here, huh?
There you go.
I'm not a very good wood carver. It'd probably something phallic.
Stick it right in the fire, Gary.
Right in the fire.
My comment to the forcedness of those two scenes also just foreshadows everything. Seeing this episode the first time, you don't know, or at least I didn't know because I hadn't read the books, what was going to happen at the end after the wedding. And so you kind of like, oh, there's still a chance. Hopefully this will work out. Everything's going to be okay. It seems like everybody's jolly. But like going back and rewatching that episode, I caught a lot of things that were like foreshadowing of, no, these people are ticked. No, he feels slighted. This is really awkward. Like, of course, this is not a safe place to be, even before the end occurs. And to the point of those scenes seem forced, I think that we as viewers have to observe the awkwardness in those scenes. Because, like, if we just showed up and they jumped to the wedding, we'd be like, oh, well, they welcomed him in, and they're now they're breaking bread and everything's fine. I kind of feel like those scenes, as awkward and forced as they were forced because they were forced and awkward for the characters themselves.
Yeah, I do want to point out, though, so I was talking more about just the awkwardness of the scene between Robb and his mother, who shouldn't have any weird thing going on. Obviously, they're not plotting against each other. So that's kind of where I'm going for. I think it's an awkward reunion. It feels like a forced reunion. That's where I was coming from.
I was going to say
that scene is specifically to set up the relationship later on.
Right, you feel like, oh, okay, well, they're trying to make an amends, like you said. It seems forced and awkward because it's not really like, why would they have that scene? It highlights the potential of reconciliation that obviously does not occur at the end of this, but you kind of feel like, oh, okay, he's not shunning his wife, everything's fine. Turns out the Freys are welcoming them in, and everything's going to end up happy-go-lucky. So to me, I see that as, yes, it's awkward, but that's like, if it just ended before that, I mean, who knows, at the very end, Catelyn might have just been like, this is going south, I'm out, peace, you know, or Rob might have just left. But the thought at the very end highlights how distraught she is, that not just her family is killed, but like, all hope is lost. Gotta give them just enough hope before you crush it.
Also sort of a reminder of the stakes, that like, even if this wedding went swimmingly, like, he was still had to pull off another gambit, like, going forward.
Is that everything you wanted to cover there, Stephen?
That was the main thing I wanted to cover.
All right, Nick.
My comment, I touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about the awkwardness of the scene. Like I prefaced the awkwardness of the characters having to go through the interaction of, hey, Frey, it's us, and this is my wife standing right next to me that I chose. Not one of your daughters, because I think they're not as attractive as she is. And all of Frey's comments about a fur mass and a nice pair of tits. It was just like, wow. Like, at one point, Catelyn has to like stick her arm out and hold Rob back because he's ready to like lunge after Frey or say something out of turn. And while he is technically the king, and the perceived intent that Frey is responding to that as, my liege, you know, I owe you homage, you know, like Rob's going to say, he's like, no, we're here because remember, we need his army to go to attack Castle Rock like you're proposing. So there's, again, like Gary said, there's so much what's at stake beyond this scene, but that scene, there's just so many layers of this person screwed this person, and this person shouldn't really be here, but now this person is, and she's a living reminder of his betrayal and the lack that his words hold for credence. It's just, it's a really good scene, but it's written, I think, intentionally forced.
I personally question, though, and like you said, this is probably for a reason, but I do question the wisdom of bringing the woman that you specifically left. Like, you left everyone for her, and you shunned this guy for her, and now you're bringing her to this wedding. That's like bringing your ex, like, or bringing your new girl that you dumped your ex for to your ex's wedding.
Yes. I mean, like, could have had,
even is that all you
know, or something, or like at the group, but like not right there. Sorry, Gary.
I was going to say, Stephen, is that there's, I think it's kind of double-sided, not playing devil's advocate, but if you don't bring the Queen of the North, then you're shunning the wedding in a completely different way, which is that you don't honor the Frey wedding enough to bring the Queen of the North. Like, you just like, oh, I'm just here as the king is here as a favor. Like, I'm not going to bring the royal audience. Sort of like the when in season 1 when Robert Baratheon went all the way to Winterfell, he brought the whole royal court with him. So I think that's yeah. Stephen, do you have something else? And I can circle back on my other point.
I was just going to say, as a thing to that, I think, though, you could have found a way to stop her from coming and avoiding those diplomatic consequences by saying something to the extent of, she's pregnant and there are, I don't know, complications to some extent. Everyone would understand that and say, she can't come. She's not in traveling mood. We're trying to keep her back from doing anything. Something to that extent. So where you're avoiding the awkwardness of her being there, and you have a adequate reason, like, to avoid what you said. I feel like it was a diplomatic faux pas.
I think I remember reading in the book about them debating that, like, if they should keep her out or not. And they decided that the insult would be even greater, and they were just trying not to insult him more, but don't know.
I guess my other point on this scene, trying to make an arbitrary border before we talk about the other things that happen at the Twins, is that I think that scene was, I don't know if it had a lot of, it was trying to set up some other things later on. It wasn't a scene that was necessary, but it was a scene that was designed to set up the reveal of the bride and the storyline of the rat cook or whatever his name was. I think it had to be noted that he received them and welcomed them to his house as guests. I think that scene had to sort of the opposite of what we say happens in later season, which is that they took their time and they set up a scene, a good setup scene to try to lay weight to the rug being pulled out from underneath you. So, Nick.
Excellent point, Gary. I totally spaced what I was just going to say. Something to the effect of, it's gone now. I'll come back to it if I think of it. Shoot. Old man.
All right. Was that it for your talking point then, Nick?
That was it. Yeah, that reception at the courtyard with the phrase was interesting.
Okay.
Oh, I remember what it was. Gosh dang it! It was made about whether or not they should have brought Talisa, whatever her name is, Talisa. About how they do have her in like a heavy cloak, like they're trying to hide who she is or what her figure looks like. And that's when Frank made the comments, like, even with that heavy cloak, I can still tell that she's a very attractive woman. So, yeah, like they did make an attempt and realize that was awkward, or at least how they tried to portray it in the show versus the books. That I just thought of that comment. We're talking about her.
Could have gave her a peg leg.
Exactly. We want you
That's
to
what they should have done. Peg leg it up.
Show you're a cripple, give you an eye patch, and be like, you chose her? Well, I don't feel so bad now. And maybe everyone would have lived.
I feel like maybe a direwolf scar on her face. Like, just give her some ambiance and some legend. Nobody you would fuck with a lady who had a fucking direwolf skull on her face. Scar on her face, sorry. Anyway.
What'd you have, Gary?
I had the meeting in this episode between John and the direwolves. Nope. Yeah, we're in episode 9. Yes. So John is fighting, and the direwolves are being controlled by Bran and the other. I honestly asked the question. Jon Snow knows what a direwolf looks like. Ghost at this point, later on, direwolf count. Jon knows what Ghost looks like. Jon has met each of these direwolves before. These direwolves probably know him. I don't know what their age was when Jon left. I guess there was a long passage of time, probably a couple of years, but Jon should know what the direwolves look like and what a direwolf looks like when it's older. So I questioned, unless Jon just assumes they're dead, but is the assumption that these direwolves are still loyal to the Starks, even though hypothetically Bran and Rickon are dead?
It's a good point, honestly. Like, because I'm pretty sure he is under the impression that they're dead because of Theon. No one said anything about the direwolves. So for all he knows, the direwolves.
I don't know if Jon got that notice, but anyway.
I thought he did. I don't know. Bob definitely did, but Jon's been kind of busy north.
He was north of the wall for a while. I don't know if he knew that.
Either way, he would know what a direwolf looks like, and he would know that the only direwolves south of the wall are those that are loyal to the Starks.
Mm-hmm.
I think the direwolves still ended up. Some of them ended up south of the wall, just not very many of them anymore. I don't think they were completely exterminated from south of the wall.
It was the first time they'd seen him in a while or something. That was like the very first episode when they were like, direwolf south of the wall, and they were all surprised. It's not unheard of, but it's incredibly strange and unusual. On the other hand, Jon's got a lot on his mind, a bit distracted, so I can forgive him for.
He was dealing with Ygritte and her confusing emotions. She was trying to
and her confusing emotions. But he's also had contact, like he's been with Orell, since that's literally like who he just like killed. So he knows that they have the ability to enter a mind of an animal like is there. So that's interesting too.
The wannabe Jack Sparrow.
Yeah, basically.
Right? So yeah, maybe he thought, just pondering Gary's question there, if he should have recognized who those direwolves were or belonged to, maybe he thought that the two direwolves were under the control of Orell.
They attacked the wildlings there. I think John was just too busy dealing with sword fighting. They're like,
Yeah.
Being stabbed in the face,
Could be it.
steel talons.
I guess it's a distracting time.
Real fucking outnumbered. Also, I guess I didn't even think about that scene. Like, Ygritte turns tail, and like throughout that entire scene, or maybe even up to the end of the season, like you don't know where Ygritte's loyalties are, because it seems like they're both sides are fighting for her soul.
All about that. I feel like she says pretty.
I got a non-audible sigh from a couple people, so that I win. So
Yeah, she says pretty early, John, it's just you and I. Screw all these other people.
Yeah.
They can go F themselves. It's just you and me, man. We're on the road, in it for life. Bonnie and Clyde.
I'm yours and you
when
are mine.
what is the big motherfucker's name? When that guy was like holding Corman? No,
Tormund. With a T.
Torman. When he was holding her, like he was saying, like he was trying to save her, and you're saying that she had already decided that, you know, fuck Tormund, like I'm with John for life.
Yeah.
He was holding her
Ride or die.
Look, see, he's it's like he's not for you, or he's not one of us. You're not for him. That's what she was saying. He's like, don't fight us for him. Like, he's
don't
not
die
worth it.
for
He's
him.
just a guy. Yeah.
You think she had already decided, so she was a
think so,
lost
yeah.
cause.
Then that like shot puppy face at the end when she just like stares and watches that he's just like, all right, we gotta get out of here. Nope, it's just me. I'm gone. Bye. And like
Bye.
leaves her.
Yeah, that's the moment, the shock in her face. Yeah.
Heartbreak.
I don't know what she expected would have happened there, but
Well, I'm just saying, also kind of a dick move, John. Like, this chick is the one chick that's been trying to help you the entire time, and he's just like, and done with you, moving on.
You don't know. I feel like he still maybe questions her loyalty, like, or he doesn't want to be the cause of her death. Like,
That could be.
maybe he just assumes that if he's gone, she's not directly implicated in the revolution.
I think he also doesn't know what to do with her, because his intention is to go to Castle Black with Ygritte alive possible, but what is he going to do with Ygritte when she gets there? Her best hope is to not be there.
I think that he's just the naive John knows nothing, mentality. Like, he doesn't know enough to think, what do I do to preserve her? He just wants to maintain the status quo. And when they come to that moment where they're storming the horse farm or whatever, he's like knocking on stones trying to draw attention, because he doesn't want anyone to die. Like, he doesn't stab the wildlings in the back or cause them to get killed, but he also doesn't want to have to kill random people that he feels he shouldn't. So yeah, he's just trying to maintain the status quo. I don't think it's as far as he doesn't know what to do with her. Loves her. Probably true.
Do you have anything else, Gary?
That was it. That was literally, and then I have, 90% of my points are regarding the second half.
All right, what'd you have, Amanda?
Gary had mine, actually, so I'm ready.
All right. I wanted to just kind of touch on the one point about the Yunkai scene with Daenerys there.
Yep.
So they sacked the city, basically, is what they said. Now, I guess maybe for my benefit, I don't quite understand what they mean when they say they sacked the city. They're like, what did they do? They just went in there, killed some guards, and then that was it?
So I think the assumption was, and I think they did a horrible job. The show itself did a horrible job at this. And I will bring this back to, I don't think, for whatever reason, Game of Thrones, no, I don't think it's poor writing. I think Game of Thrones, the show, does a bad job at portraying combat. For whatever reason, they have great writers on there, and I don't think they can do that well. And so they have the scene where 3 people go in, take out a bunch of guards, more guards come in, oh, no, they're surrounded, and it's like this tense moment. What they're supposed to be doing is going to open the front gates to allow the entire armies to move in. And exactly what you said, it skips the hell over that for a little tense scene about, oh, did they kill the guards or not? I don't care about that. You're supposed to be storming an entire city, and you think I care about these 3 random, I don't know if they think they're special ops people or something?
So, Stephen, what you're trying to say is the show struggles with scale in combat.
I think the show struggles with combat. I think it cuts a lot. Like, even in the fight scene there, it cut a lot. Like, there wasn't one organic scene where I could see who was fighting what, why was people were coming from. How in the world were they able to kill 20 people? You know how they're able to kill 20 people? They cut to one person killing one person, then cut away from him so they could cut to someone else killing someone else. And in the meantime, Guy A doesn't have to defend himself anymore. It's very cutty, it's not very organic, and it's not I don't think, a very good way of showing combat.
So you wanted the Battle of Helm's Deep. Shitty movie reference. Sorry.
Whoa.
Oh,
like where it's just a grand scale of a fucking army.
Here.
What?
Good night, everyone. Thanks for watching.
All right, Gary has now been booted from the party.
Oh my gosh.
Steven wanted a grand scale of like a couple guys versus a huge army of a city.
I don't need the grand scale. What I need to do is I need them to show the fight well. I need them to show how they get from the fight to the doors, and I need to show them opening the doors. And then people can stream in, and I can assume that, yeah, all right, maybe they overran the people from there. You can't show all that. But just to say, oh, they killed the guards, so obviously the entire city fell. It doesn't make sense.
That's an interesting point,
agree with Tyler.
Because I don't think they do battle very well, at all. Anyway,
the earlier
that's all
seasons,
I got.
I think they have a little bit more of a problem with a lot of the battle there, just due to budgets and constraints with everything, I would imagine. Nick?
Maybe. It's only the 3rd season. To your original question, sacking the city would be going in and actually like looting, rioting, razing the city to the ground, in my opinion, would be sacking the city,
yes.
Which I don't believe they did. The intent, like Steven said, was just they were going to have a few people sneak in, open the gates, and have everybody, their whole army, come through and take out the rest of the people, and the Unsullied come through. But even that didn't happen, because like the gates were closed in the front of Yunkai, and at the very end, then they opened, and all the freed slaves came out. So yeah, the story there, I agree, was very haphazard. I will definitely concede either poor writing, like Gary said, or just the way it was portrayed did not make sense. Because
they cut corners, save some costs.
They're fighting, and then all of a sudden they came back to the tent and were like, it's just like you said, the masters threw down their arms and all the slaves were freed. And then quick cuts to them just standing out in front of the gates. It's like, well, what's to say that after 3 barbarians left, the masters didn't retake up arms and re-barricade the door? Like, it was different. Yeah.
That's all the next episode, Nick, there, where they're outside the gates. But that's fine. I mean, we'll talk about it here.
Tyler, remind me at the end of the episode. I'll have to make a new cue card for Nick. That's in the that's in the other episode.
So
I
when
did
Bran
want
falls
to
out the window.
Yeah, right? So I did want to add on to Nick's as well. Yeah, I do agree they use the word sacking a city very poorly here. Sacking a city would involve what you would see the Dothraki do. There'd be a lot of raping. There would be a lot of murder. There would be a lot of looting. There would be a lot of slaughter. And this is very much not that. And so for them to say, we have sacked the city, sir. Uh-huh. You have occupied the city. What's so hard to say about that?
Yeah, didn't they play Civilization?
Ha ha ha.
All right. So now we are coming on to the big part of this entire episode. The wedding of Edmure Tully there, and basically the near complete wipe of the Starks and the Stark army and all of their bannermen pretty much off of the map.
Hold on, what happens?
So Steven,
sorry,
what happened
spoilers,
here was,
You have to say spoiler alert, Tyler.
Fuck.
You're mad at me for explaining the next 5 minutes.
Is you've watched this episode, so not my fault. If you stumble across this podcast, hey, welcome, thank you. But maybe you should probably stop listening and go back to listen to some of the earlier episodes. So I wanted to touch on first a little thing we didn't touch on in the opening part was I don't think they outright asked for it. I think that was the first time they met with Walter Frey, was asking for salt and bread. They're basically as the sign of, I am coming under your house for safety. They're basically, you have given me food and salt. They're pretty much to basically say I'm protected underneath your roof. But I don't think they outright asked for it in this episode. I'm pretty sure it happened earlier. But that is supposed to kind of try and, I'm sure, give you a little bit of sense of false hope of like, okay, maybe they're safe and everything like that. But then, like, Nick and I were talking about this earlier today, is like there's definitely cues that start happening throughout the earlier parts of once the wedding ceremony is over, once the bedding process has happened, which is basically them taking Edmure and his wife to their room for the night. Some key things happen there. Basically, one of the Freys walks back and closes the doors in silence. There, basically, the doors closed so everyone can hear him, and then all of a sudden the Rains of Castamere start playing, and like nobody else really notices it, but it seems like just Catelyn Tully or Stark there, sorry. And then all of a sudden Walter Frey interrupts that and they stop playing there. So Gary, I'm going to throw this over to you here.
Yeah, I actually, on a rewatch, it was sort of the realization, as you said, like Catelyn hears the music. Like it's not background music for the show. It is specifically setting the scene, I'm sure, as another FU to the Starks. It's like, hey, when you're getting everyone in position, they'll know the cue is we're going to start playing the Reigns of Castamere. Then everybody get in their positions and be prepared. Shit's going to go down. Tyler?
So another thing I remembered, and I don't know if this was clearly heard throughout the castle grounds and stuff like that too, but they do a lot of cutting outside because also at the same time Arya is with the Hound trying to get to the twins there because that is where the Hound is taking her to try and sell her back to her family. And when they do some of the outside scenes there, you can hear the Reigns of Castamere playing outside. Now, I don't know if that's just music for the show to kind of set the scene, or if it's supposed to indicate too like a timing thing there of like, hey, when we play the Reigns of Castamere, all of you people outside, get ready there, basically, because you can see the Freys are kind of even too intermittently placed in the hall. Like, I'm pretty sure I caught a little bit. There was a Frey or a Frey man just about at every table there, too. So when stuff happened, it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it there, Nick.
Nick?
Also, too, on a rewatch, I noticed the Blackfish said he had to go take a piss on a tree. Like when that first happened, or later on in the season, I was like, so now we're talking about this scene, so you know that the Blackfish is not in that end scene. Not giving anything away. But in the end of that scene, it's like, oh crap, what happened to the Blackfish? Is he all right? Is he okay? And distinctly, he says, "I gotta go take a piss on a tree" before they close that door, and he just gets
I missed that.
Spoiler alert! You don't realize who survives until next season, Nick.
I didn't say he survived.
He went and took a piss on a tree.
Yeah,
They talk about it in the next
dead or
episode.
hung outside.
and they talk
mentioned
about it in
that
the
he
next
got away.
episode too. Yeah, like
Yeah, in the next episode they mentioned that he got away. Roose Bolton says it. But yeah, I didn't actually catch it the first time I watched this one. It wasn't until he was mentioned he got away that when you rewatch it, you see him get up and say that, and I'm like, oh, well, that's where it happened. Because nope, I was just like, it's a wedding, people are moving around.
Yeah,
because normally, I was gonna say, because normally the one place he'd be is next to Catelyn because he despises his nephew. He's been a blackfish of his entire family, but he generally, you get the sense that he really does care for Catelyn. Like he really, I think, is the one relative that he still respects. So
absolutely, I was gonna say too, like such a renowned fighter, like there would have been a definite scene of like all the Frey saying, "Go after him first," right? Since we don't see that in this upcoming scene, it's like, what happened to him? Well, he must have just got offed somehow or something off screen, and we didn't see it.
Yep.
So it was interesting on the rewatch. I caught him distinctly, knowing that he's such a strong fighter, and like you said, would be right next to Catelyn, that he specifically had to relieve himself for the party. Had to peek
relieve
at it.
himself. I just happened to, on a rewatch, sort of notice, not even when shit goes sideways, but more of the setup of the scene. Lord Frey is sitting in a chair with two large towers behind it, like very much a lordly chair. And he also has the largest wine goblet of anyone there. Like he is there to party. Like, and then the married couple is on his left, and then on his right, the person who you know, very little introduction is his wife number, whatever number. And then there's like a one of his daughters next to that. And so I'm guessing the assumption is that one of Lord Frey's daughters is friends with her dad's wife. Like, anyway, that's what I thought was interesting, is one of the daughters introduced in the earlier scene is sitting and chatting with the Lord Frey's wife, who literally I don't even know if has a speaking line in the entire show. Like, as tertiary characters go, I don't know if she was even that good of an actress. Like, she's just sort of looks dumbfounded in every scene. But anyway, Nick.
Playing devil's advocate to delay Tyler from talking about the actual Red Wedding as much as possible. Do we think Rosalind, Edmure's now wife, is actually a Frey? He clearly is, to be blunt, much more attractive than his other daughters, and wasn't highlighted as one of the daughters when he introduced all of his daughters and granddaughters. Do we think that she's actually related to him? Or, since we find out this is a ruse, just someone who's brought in to, like, oh yeah, absolutely, and make Edmure want to stay? I think it's interesting. It highlights the level of subterfuge that these characters are willing to go to, Gary.
I think that it definitely is one of his actual descendants or something to that tie it to the line, because I think that he knows he's killing off basically all of the Tullys. He now has the heir to the what is it? River Run? Yeah, he has the heir to River Run, and he has the heir to River Run at his command. So this is the way of getting the weakest of the Tullys to be the leader of River Run, and by that, now he controls River Run.
See, interesting.
Lord Frey is the lord of the Riverlands. Like, that's what he gained by this subterfuge. He's the lord of the Riverlands.
He kills off all
and I
there.
think, as not trying to spoil, I think more explanation of the daughter and why the marriage, some of this, some background story is better explained in the next season. Not huge spoilers, but I think it's better explained in the next season. So, anyway, Tyler, sorry.
I will say, number one, I do think she's related to Walter, because every ugly apple apparently produces a good-looking one at some point in time. So, I mean,
Ouch. Conceded much?
little. And then number two, Gary just throwing massive shade at an actress who tried her hardest there to be
Real.
Walter's betrothed wife there. Come on, Gary. Don't have to be so negative.
But understand, Nick.
But then, yeah, like, oh, I'd lost my train of thought then too there. Go ahead, Amanda. I'm going to sit here and think for a little bit.
I thought Stephen had a good point. I thought at first that Walder Frey was making, just in case this doesn't work out for me, no matter what, he's married, he's got one of his daughters married to the heir of River Run. I don't know if I want to give him credit for that quite yet. But I do think that even by this, as that, even if it's contested, he does still have the power. Even if he was very insistent that the marriage get consummated. He was like, the wedding needs a bedding, and if it does, and if it produces an heir, he doesn't need Edmure anymore. Head Nick.
Very true. Very true. I think that again, things like dissecting it more so than just the shock of holy crap, this is happening. I noticed that Walder Frey seemed very like nervous, almost not really afraid, but like, holy crap, this is working out, when like the scenes would cut to him while the chaos is happening. And then again, I'm getting ahead of myself in the next episode, but it seemed as though he would be referred to as someone who was not a very brave person who would do something like this on his own. And so, to your point, Amanda, like, yeah, I think that he was like trying to, even though that it seemed like he was doing what he was doing, he still wanted to make sure he had other ulterior motives crossed off as well, just in case this went south. He still would like to have a claim to the Riverlands.
I guess, and just two things. One, to echo both of you guys. Walder Frey didn't get to be as old as he was by being stupid, and he has portrayed as many things. Unintelligent is not one of them. So, yes, you're completely right. I think that he probably had... I think that's a good call out from both of you. I think he had a plan for secondary. My other point is one that I made last episode, and that is concerning the bedding ceremony. I told you there were bedding ceremonies. I was told last episode that it wouldn't be necessary for someone of that rank, of Tyrion's rank, but for this it is. I say not, sir. I say not.
Go ahead, Stephen.
It's got all the most random signs.
So I was going to point out that the bedding ceremony was obviously a way to usher off innocence, except for obviously his wife. Like, of all the people, because you notice, like, all of his other daughters take Lord Edmure out, and then I'm guessing other people take Lady Frey out.
Husband.
So I'm guessing it's to narrow down the room. It's very much, and he got all of his daughters out of the room, and I'm guessing the only people left in the room were his natural-born sons. Like, not even Bannerman. I'm sure the only people left in that room were his biological children. You know, you don't think so? Tyler's shaking no. He's got a shitload of sons, and there only needed to be maybe 20 sons in that room, and then the crossbow dudes up top. But anyway, Amanda.
Did anyone else notice the look of panic on Rosin's face when they announced the bedding, too? Like, yes, like she could be concerned about, the fact that there's the bedding, but like considering how well, not 2 seconds before, she was getting along with him, she has to know what's going on. She is now tied to this. She is going to now be bedded to this man who is about to lose his entire family, and it was an interesting look, I thought. Interesting reaction.
That's interesting. I did note that, like, yeah, she looked fucking terrified, whereas Edmure looked like he was super excited. Like, it was a very contradictory look between the two people. Anyway, so, that's all I got.
There is one person we are forgetting. We haven't talked much about him, Gary. He is not a Frey at the wedding ceremony. It's Mr. Roose Bolton there, who has now...
Ooh. You're gonna bullshit me on a fucking technicality? One dude in the room isn't a Frey?
He's the biggest non-Frey in the room.
Jeez, Gary, do you know anything?
Because for the longest time, he was Rob's bannerman there, basically, by Rob's side, and now he has done the biggest swerve and become a heel, to quote some wrestling facts here, wrestling terminology.
However, if the more you know about Roose Bolton, he doesn't have any children. He is the head of his house. Like, so he doesn't have any other sons that could be in the room that are already somewhere else.
Any legitimate children. Let's keep the facts straight.
Yeah, anyway.
Children.
So he
has an illegitimate child?
His wife, his future wife is another Frey. So he needed to be there, but he is somebody who could be trusted by the Freys because he's marrying one of Lord Frey's daughters, which is ultimately one of Lord Frey's ultimate goals, to get rid of some of his damn kids. So I think, other than him, all the rest are his fucking children. Back to you.
I was gonna say
back to you, Jim.
Lost my train of thought. God dang it. Go, Tyler. I'll reserve mine to go after you again.
So I think though Roose Bolton was there on behalf of the Lannisters helping Frey. I think probably Roose Bolton was ultimately the negotiator between all of this because he says the ultimate line there at the end to Robb Stark, the Lannisters send their regards.
Mm-hmm.
You think he's the one who brings the deal?
I think
He's
is. Just tying it back to his conversation with Jaime there at Harrenhal. There, he talks about like, hey, when you see your father, tell him it was not my fault you lost your hand there. Put in a good word for me there, basically kind of like seemed just kind of like on your initial watch, it seemed kind of weird, I think, the first time you see it, but like on these subsequent rewatches, you can kind of go, well, that is really weird that he would kind of say it like that and everything like that. Maybe something isn't quite right here.
You're saying he's opening the channels of communication, and once the channels of communication are open, then he can be given these secret plans.
I think the communication had already been opened before that point there.
Yeah.
I think
he's just the recipient. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying not to get in front of you, Nick. I apologize, but I think there's also Walder Frey specifically says, you think you could have slighted me and gotten away with all this sort of yada yada. He's not saying anything about how he did the Lannisters any good. He's just all upset about himself. Like Tyler said, it's Roose Bolton that says the Lannisters send their regards. It's Walder Frey don't give no craps.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say. It was, not to sound too political, who knew what and when did they know it? Which ties into that question about the communication. I'm not even going into history. Put your stupid sign away. I really hate that man.
Called out. Put your stupid sign away.
Exactly. Just how, Roose is the one who was probably just there. Like he's several scenes that lead up to this. Again, foreshadowing, if you go back and rewatch really the character of Roose Bolton, he's a no one. Like he's not mentioned, he's not with the Umbers or the Karstarks or even in the tent a lot of the times with Jon. But he's kind of in the background of most scenes, just kind of sitting there glowering. And the more and more you hear his name and see him, yeah, he is someone who actually has some position of power, but is overshadowed by everything that Robb does. So leading up to this scene, he does have a vested interest that if Robb goes down, he's like the next in command, since the Umbers the Karstarks all left after Lord Karstark was offed. And so he does have a vested interest, I think, in that communication of who's bringing the message that you're just talking about. The Lannisters send their regards. The Lannisters, who owns the Lannisters, Tywin, probably reached out to Roose, and Roose Bolton was very receptive to it, because then if Jon falls, then I'm next in line to have some position of power. And then, I think Walder Frey didn't really care about the Lannisters winning. He just wanted to be left alive to get vengeance, more or less, on being slighted by Robb. So I think that the dominoes were all stacked, ready to fall the way they did. It just needed someone who was willing to say, do this and I'll back you. Which is what seems to have happened at this point in the story without exposing too much in the next episode. I think that's what likely happened.
I think one thing I would have liked to see more of, and I know it's just a me thing, but I would have liked to see the diplomacy that went behind this negotiation for Roose Bolton to switch sides like this, because I can't imagine that it would have been easy. I don't think it would have been quick. Like, this had to be ongoing. At what point does it start? At what point does it come to fruition? Like, how does this even get approached? Who brings it up? There's so many questions there that I would just really, really like to know.
Yeah, and I'm probably still going to maintain, though, I think it was probably Roose who started the initial conversation there. Just, this is something we probably learn a little bit later on there, especially a little bit more into the next episode there. He seems more of like the calculating kind of person. And he's like, we touch on this a little bit too when we talk about the next episode there. He's a little bit more slighted, he feels, with everything going on there. And he probably realizes there's an opportunity to where Robb is kind of at this point in the war there where, yeah, he's winning every battle, but now he's getting harder and harder to actually get into battles. They're having a harder time of basically fighting the Lannisters. And he sees it as an opportunity for him to say, well, I wonder if I can put a raven out to Tywin there and basically say, hey, I've got this opportunity for you where we can basically just end the war right here, right now. All you have to do is just not kill me, pretty much. Nick?
I was going to say, we talked about the tactical warfare position and strategy a little bit in some of the other podcasts. And yeah, we talked about how losing focus has kind of stymied what Robb's been trying to do. So at first, as you were talking, I was like, no, Tywin instigated all of this. But Tywin wouldn't really, he'd know of Roose Bolton, but he wouldn't know the dissension in the ranks, really. I bet you that, yeah, I back that wholeheartedly. Roose probably reached out cautiously, carefully, behind Robb's back, and Tywin jumped at the chance to end the war. Yeah. Interesting observation.
I would still want to know kind of how that happened, though, because as we talk about, Roose doesn't have any legitimate children, and Roose doesn't have any really close family members, and that's who you'd trust to carry out this sort of negotiation, is someone you trust wholeheartedly. Who in the world would you think that Roose would trust wholeheartedly? That's something I find very hard to fathom.
I don't know if he trusts anyone wholeheartedly, but would he have maybe had his one random guy from Harren Hall who cut off Jaime's hand send a raven or in person go relay such a message?
Maybe Lord or maybe the former Maester Qyburn took a message back with him.
Ooh.
Oh, that's a clever. Yeah, that might be. That's a good idea.
He sent people with Jaime.
True.
What's the timeline there? Because didn't Jaime arrive after this, or is this before?
So, yes,
Next episode, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the next episode. Jaime does arrive back to King's Landing there. So yeah, you're right. The timeline is, and it goes back. I think we've had this conversation before too. Of like the show does kind of a poor job sometimes of saying these events are taking place at the same time. Really, there. The last thing to just touch on here is Catelyn's final plea, basically to Walder to say, "Let Robb go. We'll forget this ever happened," and stuff like that, or I'll kill your wife or something like that too. And it's just like Walter cold-heartedly just says back to her, "Well, I guess I'll just get another wife." And so too, this is the one point where you can glaringly see a lot of the book readers definitely pointed this out of like, this is supposed to set up a character in the book called Lady Stoneheart, who you see all over basically a lot of YouTube theories and stuff like that. But she never shows up in the show. Not a spoiler here, but basically they're just saying she's not a character in the show. This is one of the times they basically cut a character completely from the source material.
Oh, they would not do that.
No, never.
It's rude.
How dare they?
Harry, get your Rolodex out. Where's the poor writing?
And two, one final thing to note too is I'm pretty for sure the entire credits are this way. It jumped to the next episode for me right away, but like the entire credits, I'm pretty for sure are just silence.
Yes,
Silence.
Yes, they are. Because I noticed that because I didn't remember exactly how it ended, and I was expecting it to be the Reigns of Castamere, and it was just, oh, whoa, oh, I don't remember this. Okay.
Yeah.
It was also a long shot. It was a very long, like, just on, like, her, and she's, like, in just absolute defeat as watching her son die and realizing that she's losing, and she slits Lady Frey's throat. And then she's, like, the camera just sits on her for probably 5-10 seconds, and, like, she's just sitting there, and then out of nowhere, just one of his sons comes up and slices her throat, and then that goes to black.
Yeah.
It really wants you to sit in that, like, that emotion.
Think on what you've done.
Yeah. Anyway. Nick?
I think that end scene juxtaposes the beginning battle map strategy scene of her saying, make them feel what it's like to lose something they love. Like determination, grit. and fierceness, and the wolf will survive, juxtaposed to just her scream of agony that my children
that's a
are
good,
dead.
yeah.
I'm dead. We're screwed. We are so in trouble here. There's no way we can get out of this. I just saw my son's wife die, him die. This is over, you know. And I think that's part of, again, that setup and that exposition of this is really good, and there's a possible reconciliation where the wolf will persevere. To no. Again, if you think it has a happy ending, you're not paying attention.
Not paying attention.
One question I have is more for us book readers here too. I think we've talked about this too with her before. Is Rob's wife at the wedding in the books, or she's not there, right?
She is not there in the books. Nope.
Okay. And her being a former offshoot of the Lannisters, stuff like that, I wonder if that would have changed anything had she been there. But that was just more of a question, I think, for me. Steven?
Well, that's interesting.
That is, yeah. I guess I had two real quick things. The first of which I don't remember, but was about the Red Wedding. Oh, no, I do remember. So I think there are 2 points in exactly what Nick just said, and it reminded me of another part. There are 2 points in this episode where you're watching and you think that it's a nice bottle. It's a nice bottle. Anyways,
I'm having some because they died.
Yeah, Nick is drinking in honor of the fallen. So, but anyways, Lady Catelyn's absolute vehemence that she is going to do that, and then just the not happening. And then I actually remembered Arya saying that to the Hound earlier. Arya turning to the Hound while they are staring at the twins and saying, "I am going to stick a dagger in your eye to the back of your skull," sort of thing. And just with an absolute deadly vehemence turns away, just no emotion in it whatsoever. And you're like, oh, I think I just heard the end of the, like, what is going to be foretold in that. And it is, I mean, we can't talk about that, but it's another one of those scenes where just a very
deep cut.
What? Oh,
Deep cut, like,
yeah, a cut from your eyeball to the back of your skull is a deep cut. That is a true statement.
There are so many moments early in this show where now, again, watching what's going to happen, not spoiling anything, but you see these moments of these characters where it's like, that's not something the character 5 episodes or even, last season would have said, right? There's no way that Arya from season 1, who's just this little precocious scamp playing swords with her Bravosi trainer, would stare at the Hound and threaten him. Not so much threaten, like tell him, if I had a dagger right
just
now,
straight
I'd do
tell
this
him
to you. Just straight, like, this is what I'm going to do to you. Not like, if you do that again or say that again, she's just like, one day I'm going to do this. It's like there's these moments where these characters have always maybe been these characters, and we're just seeing that side of them come out.
He's a psychopath. I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right. So, I think that probably wraps it up for this episode, unless anyone has any more points to talk, John. Gary, you look like you got something.
I just pointing out earlier about like setting up scenes for the sake of a payoff. I feel like there was an emotional, like, just cheap move, and that's that. Not only did you point out earlier, which I didn't know, that Rob's wife wasn't at the wedding in the book, but then they reveal that she intends to name the kid Ned if it's a boy. I'm like, this is just like emotionally like feathering on that they're so happy and they're like that, like they're winning and like they're both in absolute just joy. Like everything's on the uphill for them. And then they just to like slam the door in their face. And like she doesn't get killed by a slit to the throat like everybody else. She just gets stabbed in the stomach. Like well, that's probably the exception. Rob, I think, gets like shot with shitloads of arrows. Catelyn gets her throat like slit. She never has. They only stab her in the stomach. Like I thought
Honestly,
that was just emotional evilness. Anyway, Nick.
Emotional evilness. I would say that she's been determined to be pregnant at this point. All the additional loss of blood from her abdomen that's from carrying a child would probably did her in. Because that was something else that I noticed too at the very end when Rob crawls over to her. He holds her momentarily, and she's already gone. Like, and her eyes are, not there. And I was like, oh dang, she's already gone. Like, I thought, again, I'm just like in the shock watching this the first time. Now I'm kind of trying to dissect it. Like, when did she actually pass? Did she get a relaxed moment where she like looked at him tearfully or something? Or did he have a moment where he was like, I brought this on us or anything? No, she's already gone. Like, she went painfully, but probably the most, you let somebody die peacefully. What's the word I'm looking for?
Violently.
The internal bleeding?
Oh no, like it's all right. It's all right. There's a phrase I'm thinking of, but yeah, like she probably had the least violent death. That like her throat wasn't slit where she could still contemplate or her brain is still working or anything like that. It's like I'm badly stabbed, I'm bleeding out very quickly, and then pass within like the next 30 seconds to a minute because that's when Rob like crawls over to her. Whereas Rob, like you said, gets the arrows, then stands up, says mother, and then finally Ruth stabs him again in the heart. So it's rough to watch. But how like who saw what, who witnessed who die before they died themselves, and then Catelyn has to be the last one to watch everybody else die.
I actually very much agree with you on that, Nick. It was they specifically target her stomach because she's pregnant. They're going less to kill her and more to kill the child of Rob, and it is absolutely it's brutal to watch. It's absolutely kind of terrifying to watch. I'll be honest.
I will say, she didn't die the most violent death in terms of physical harm to her, but she probably died one of the most violent ways possible as far as emotional too, because she went out knowing her child is dead, her husband is soon to follow, her entire adopted family of the North is gone, the entire thing that she's been fighting for or whatever with her husband is gone. So she went out knowing basically like everything is just gone too. Like one of the more sadder deaths there of the group. Amanda.
They also just noted that they started with each one to watch their son die, so they killed the baby so Robb Stark would see that. Then they killed Robb so that his mom would see that.
Yep.
You are dead, your heir is dead, your heir's heir is dead.
And then Lord Frey got to watch his baby wife die.
Gary's giggling about it.
I think you
started mentioning, I have a very perverse mind, and I accept that. But you're like, oh, and they all have to watch their loved one die. I'm like, and Lord Frey got to watch
they did.
Very fucking young child
watch their loved one die, and Frey just watched some woman he didn't care about die.
Yeah.
He's got plenty of heir. He's got plenty of kids, as Gary pointed out. All these damn kids.
One thing maybe it's a slight thing, and it can be explained away by emotional discord and all that sort of stuff. That surprised me was that after they slit Robb's throat, his mom doesn't just go, instead of just screaming, go ah, and then just emotional freeze, just doesn't go straight at Walder with that damn knife she has in her hand. Because that's what I would have made them. I think everyone says this. I would have made them kill me. Just go right for the person who was in charge for that. I mean, like I said, it could be explained through emotional shock, but I find it strange that she didn't go straight for Walder, and I don't think she would have made it.
Saying like throwing knife the dagger she has at his face.
She's like what, 20 paces away from him? Just run.
Turning John Wick at his face.
Yeah, get a pencil.
All right. Are we good for this episode?
I have a couple of other points. I guess just the direwolves. The direwolves obviously were sad. They knew shit was going down. And then, what is the direwolf count at this point? It's Ghost, Nymeria.
Which one? Are you counting ones that
names.
are alive, or what's
Yeah,
happening?
ones are like
Gone.
Ghost, Nymeria, Summer, and Shady Dog.
Shaggy dog.
Shaggy Dog.
Shit. Anyway, so 4. We still have four of the 6 that I don't
There
know.
he is, friend of the dogs.
Tormund Giantsbane.
Whatever. Anyway, that's all I had was that we were one less direwolf in the world.
An interesting theory too. I thought I read about this a while ago for the direwolf too. Is like somebody theorized that all the Stark children kind of have that connection to their direwolves there. Somebody theorized that maybe Robb at the last moment there learned about warging into his animals. So when his body died, he warged into Greywind. I believe that's the direwolf's name there. But then Greywind dies there again too, being killed in the pen there. So Robb dies basically twice in his life. Or what is his life there?
I feel like that's a
was the
huge
source for that?
stretch.
I think it's a little
What's
bit
the
more
source for
explained
that?
in the book there. Like it's more of a book theory there.
Is it, Amanda?
He wargs into him?
I haven't heard that one about Robb Stark. That's interesting. Either way, he's dead.
What about
Sorry.
Lady? What about Lady? Did she warg? Did Sansa warg into Lady?
Did
Sansa cut
lady
that connection
warg into
a lot, too.
Sansa?
But that connection,
Sansa wargs and Lady wargs into Sansa.
that was funny.
All right, so we're gonna move on to episode 10, Misa. Bran and company travel beyond the wall. Sam returns to Castle Black. Jon says goodbye to Ygritte. Jaime returns to King's Landing. The Night's Watch asks for help from Stannis.
Says
All right.
goodbye to Ygritte. That's an understatement.
And her emotional stress. So I think I'm thinking, according to my notes here, the episode basically opens here with the continued slaughter of the Northern Army there, except everything that happened outside the castle. And then you also see basically the desecration of Robb's corpse there, where he has his head lopped off, and then they, air quotes, sew his direwolf's head on top of his there. So just the more brutality going on there. But go ahead, Nick.
With that, I have to take a page out of Gary's handbook and say I was perverse that I slowed that down and actually watched that. To go on, like, understand what that scene was or how they did that. And yeah, like you said, air quotes, sewed it on. To me, it looked like they had pikes shoved in. There was like solid straight lines there, or thicker lines, not like sewing string lines. And there was a board in his back that had kept him upright on the horse that they brought him out with. And when they turned him sideways, you could see that it was his wolf's, Greywind's head on his shoulders. Yeah, just like I forget who made the comment earlier, but having to not only see the emotional torment, I think the word was emotional discord or something like that. It was, yeah, your enemies are dead. You don't have to do anything else, but they went ahead and like desecrated the corpse just to like add insult to injury. It's like, that was never needed. That was never part of the plan. And just, yeah, I don't know why they did that, but it's like, holy crap, like how far south that whole situation went. It's like you see the memes of people who are like, yeah, these people did this, yeah, I did this, and I did this to them, and everyone else was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
It's like there was no it's like, yeah, we destroyed our enemies because it's a war between 5 kings. Tywin says, it's a war, people die all the time. Yeah, it's like, and I just cut their heads off, and so does shot direwolf's head on their shoulders. It's like, jeez, man. It's just, yeah, not needed, but just like speaks to either the depravity or the insult that they were given as even dead characters.
I would say that it maybe speaks to the frustration of this ongoing, continuing, massive conflict. Because, I mean, you're right. In every war ever, desecrating soldiers has been a taboo, but is also something that we've always seen happen. I mean, you talk back to, Gary doesn't like history, but back to the Siege of Troy, what did they do to Hector's body? Roll it around the city, desiccating it. I mean, I'm thinking even in Afghanistan, where U.S. troops, who I do not think are in any way, shape, or form evil, were peeing into Taliban soldiers' skulls. I mean, there is there's a lot of desecration that happens in war, and a lot of it's due to frustration, and I also think to bad I want to say NCO shit, but that wouldn't work in this world. Like low level leadership. And I think that this is something where I think you could say there's probably not great low level leadership from these areas. I don't think they invest in that. I don't think that you'd have any sort of care for it. I think the Lannisters would probably have it. I think that the Starks might have a bit of it. Some established real armies, but like the Freys, I don't think they'd ever have it. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me to see them desecrating corpses. Desecrating corpses, not desiccating. Different word.
Okay, so to go to Steven's point, then I'll hit on Nick's point. To Steven's point, you're talking about Roose Bolton, whose family motto is "Let's fucking flay some motherfuckers," and then you're talking about the Freys. Lord Frey doesn't give a shit. He does not care. Like this didn't come from some low middle management. This came from the fucking top. He's like, I know what we need to fucking do. Let's cut that fucker's head off, find his direwolf, and parade him around. Like, Nick made it sound like this was like, oh my gosh, it's like, they have to prove that he's dead. Like, he's a symbol for the Northern Revolution, and like, until all of his soldiers can see the dead body, like, that has power. So anyone who's still fighting and like, oh my god, we gotta fight and we gotta get into the castle and try to help Robb. Well, there's his direwolf. That's our best weapon in the war. And there's Robb's body. I want to get the fuck out. So the exit's that way.
So, real quick, before you get to his point, I agree with you that is something that they would want to parade around his body, but this isn't parading around his body. This is different. This is them playing with his body. This isn't any sort of... it doesn't seem at all...
They just cut his head off and cut his direwolf's head off.
It is but it would be guided. So what do they do at King's Landing when they cut off people's heads? They put it on a pike specifically so people can look at it. It's very, very methodical, and it's process-oriented, if you want to get to that word. This was not that. This was people playing with a corpse. And this is in the effect of, like I said, peeing a Taliban corpse's head. That is what this is. This is not to scare anyone else in the world. If you did that, you would quarter him, maybe send a piece of him to every single one of the lords up north, say, hey, here's your king, by the way. This is not that.
Yeah, to your point, Gary, they could have just walked out with his head and been like, boy be dead, something simple. It's the difference between hey, look, here, he's dead, versus, taking the frog that's dissected in biology class and being like, look, it's still hopping. You're playing with the corpse. That's not cool. That's the difference there. That why I think the phrase... probably don't have a standing army. They have troops and they have weapons, so they have forces, but not like a trained army, like what Stephen was saying, versus like the North and definitely the Lannisters. So for quote unquote civilized forces in this time, people would probably be like, holy crap, that's like a step above. What the heck are you doing? Versus other people who are like, hey, check it out, look what we did. It's a line that would not necessarily be crossed, but would definitely distinguish who is who and who is not. I think in that world timeline.
But in the two groups who did it, they don't respect Robb Stark. The Freys, as a family, as an organization, were slighted by the Starks. Like, he made a promise. He promised to make a Frey the Queen of the North. And he just shit on that promise, and they got Lord Edamure instead. And the Karstarks, had their lord killed. And so, and even the Roose Bolton, he's not been treated well. He told Robb, we don't need to be going to Riverrun. The war is that way. We're not doing... And so he got slighted by the young wolf. So I think it just became personal. it became that they hated him so much and he didn't realize it. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about on that. We all have our opinions. I just think they hate him more than you realized.
Well, then even to kind of shifting over a little bit too, there's the conversation with Roose Bolton and Walder Frey. I don't know if you guys had completely touched on that part there. We kind of hinted to it a little bit there in the past episode discussion there, where Roose Bolton kind of comes out and says, you know, he's being proclaimed Warden of the North. They kind of mock and make fun of, you know, the young wolf, forever young. And then we learn of what happened at Winterfell there. And for finally, after so many episodes, the hero of the revolution gets a name. And that name is, Gary?
Ramsay Snow. Instead of Ramsay Bolton, he's Roose Bolton's son, but he's Ramsay Snow.
And the snow indicates that he is a bastard there. He is a bastard of the North there. All right.
As in he is not a legitimate son, not just because he's a terrible human being.
He's a fucker.
Difference doesn't need to be made.
Ramsay did nothing wrong.
Fun anti-historical here. What do you think Ramsay would have done if Theon's first choice had been Bolton's?
Still would have kept
first choice, not even a second thought, just went Bolton.
Oh, Stephen, I'm sure that Ramsay is a person who would have respected that and completely let him go.
I know he wouldn't have respected it, but it might have thrown him off his game a little bit.
I think he'd been taken aback to like, oh, you're smarter than I think you are. I think he still would have tortured him, but he might have gone a little harder. Gone a little harder just because
Let's take another finger.
Yeah.
Hey, so I think it also maybe, going back to how Theon, it's maybe a sign of how he didn't really understand the North. Because in the episode 1 introduction of the houses, what are their sigils, what are their words, you would figure out you're on a cross being held, and what is the Ramses banner is a man on a cross. On an X, not a cross. That's
a good
religious.
point, honestly. Like, Ned Stark would have seen to it that he was educated, so Theon clearly didn't pay attention at all.
Theon seemed like the type of guy who'd pay attention in class.
Does not do his homework.
He was more known for his appendage and the use thereof than he was for learning the house sigils.
Sent back his favorite toy.
Exactly.
Oh. Sad panda.
No, it was also a very telling, not even talking about the hero of a revolution. I'm still going to call him that. Probably because I'm going to forget his name. But his dad didn't even give a fuck. His dad had completely given up on him. And at the end of the episode, only his sister was willing to, like, do what he needed to do. They needed to do for family. Like, proof that his sister values family more than his dad does.
Yeah, she was willing to go do something.
Yeah, he definitely had
had
zero cares there, basically, about Theon there.
He cannot father the line. He's not even a man anymore, right? And he just basically sits down in his chair to like, well, that really sucks. You know, not like to think of poor Theon, what he may be going through or has gone through. He's just like sits in his chair by himself. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, getting back, I don't know why we'd expect him to care, given the introduction. I mean, he kind of seems like you brought it upon yourself sort of guy. And, you walked into... yeah, I don't know.
The interesting juxtaposition, again, back and forth here, talking about the barbarism of the phrase. Like, if you read some of the history in that book about what the Ironborn have done to one another or other people, like, any upsettedness at seeing an appendage in a box is probably just because he's related to said person's appendage. It has nothing to do with the horrors of seeing, dismembered body parts. Like, the Ironborn are barbarians, they do raids. It's interesting. I just thought of that too. Like, his whatever Balon Greyjoy's mindset may have been.
They would know the difference between Ray taking over a city and sacking it.
Yeah.
I feel like the different, like something interesting about Balon and Ramsay Snow is that they're very much bottle episode characters. I guess Ramsay has seen some other people, but you've never actually seen whatever his name was. I already forgot his name. 30 seconds later.
Ramsay?
Balon Greyjoy?
No, Theon, yeah, you've never seen him interact with any other character than his two children. Like, so he's very much a bottle episode character.
Well, he's also a defeated character because he did try and invade the North, and Robert Baratheon and Ned and several others beat him back to the Iron Islands, and they kept Theon as a hostage with the Starks, more or less. And so he's probably a bottled character in the sense that he feels defeated. He doesn't really want to go do anything until, Robb marches the north-south, and then he sends Yara and Theon to go attack it. Ooh, history.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead, Nick. You can cover your points.
I was gonna say, no, you're fine. Oh, dang it! I missed my point. There was something I was gonna say in response to something else too. In the missive that's sent along with Theon's favorite toy, Balon reads, "Remove your remaining Greyjoys from the North, or I will flay them like I did the remaining 20 other members." Do we think they actually flayed the other people that were with them there?
So this is something that I remember being touched on in the books there, basically. The way Winterfell is taken back there is, I think Ramsay goes up presenting himself as an ally there to help Theon. They let him in the gates, and then they basically slaughter, once they get inside the gates, they basically slaughter all of Theon's forces. Take over Theon's forces, and probably Ramsay keep some of them alive and flay them. I believe that's what happens in the books.
I can't speak to the books. I know that in this point in the series, we don't know, or we haven't seen what has happened to the other Ironborn who whacked Theon in the back of the head. It's like, why didn't you hit him sooner? You were supposed to hit him sooner. He's like, I didn't want to interrupt him. He seemed like he was on a roll. And there's we're introduced to that second lieutenant guy who was a good Ironborn, and several other forces for Theon's troops. But all we've seen of Winterfell is that it's burnt, right? It's like literally being raised on fire. So I don't know if they're still in Winterfell. We don't know at this point in the story. So I don't know if his forces are still in Winterfell trying to hold out. So it's interesting to hear in the books that Ramsay goes back to Winterfell.
I thought it was assumed in the show that they gave him away. Like, they surrendered him with the assumption that they could get free passage to get the fuck out of there. And I think Ramsay kind of sort of turned on that offer, so...
Yeah, I think...
Doesn't sound like Ramsay.
I think Roose touches on that there. Right?
See? In the show or the book?
When he's talking with Walder Frey there about what happened there at Winterfell there, I think he's touched on that. All those guys were pretty much killed there too. But I don't think you're supposed to realize that there might still be people there. I think it's pretty much said that they're dead.
There's this hierarchy of people that some people can be crossed, and some people you do not F with, right? From what we know now that Roose has identified this mysterious torturer for Theon as his bastard son, it's like, you do not screw with the Boltons. Clearly they're ambitious.
He's the hero of the revolution. You will refer to him as such.
That they are overreaching enough that, like we said, maybe either Roose had someone reach out to Tywin and the Lannisters, or however that went down. And then likewise too, there's no repercussion for I can't think of that stupid word about how you kill somebody. Mercy killing comes to mind, or trying to do someone in a way that's less violent, or try to make it quick. But there's none of that in Roose. He clearly has Theon. He doesn't need him anymore. Like even after sending his body part to Balon with his terms, he said something like in the missive, or more boxes will come with more parts of Theon, or something to that message. So I guess then it makes sense to keep him as a prisoner, but he's already mentally distressed, far more damaged than he ever probably needed him to be, right? Again, juxtaposition. I'm telling you, it's all about the relationships between the families. The Starks have Theon as a hostage. Right? He's basically made a member of the family and gets to walk around free. Whereas the Boltons have him as a hostage.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Well, I was gonna say one's a political hostage and one's a military hostage. That's not entirely right. That's not actually correct. They're both political hostages, really.
It goes back to the desecration that we were talking about with Gary.
Amanda, what do you have for this episode?
Sam and Gilly make it past the wall and meet Bran. I've seen this before, and yet every time I just get so excited that like these two different people from two different groups that we've been seeing finally meet. It's so exciting. And immediately Sam's like, "You're John's brother," and Bran's like, "No, I'm not." Which was great defense, Bran. But I mean, you weren't prepared for it. I grant you. At the wall, I am sure you didn't expect to have someone to recognize you. But Sam says he's been around ghosts long enough. He knows a dire wolf.
I have two quick, really funny things. Sorry, were you done, Amanda, with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have two really quick things. You said, "No, he's not," and in my head, I had this really quick mental picture of Bran like, "You're the boy that fell out the window," and Bran being like, "No, I can walk," and trying to awkwardly stand up. And it just
look
made
at
me
me!
Approve it.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I can move. And then also too, Tarly is able to point out, "Hey, you have a direwolf. You must be a Stark." John doesn't know this. To the point we made earlier. Interesting.
Fair.
So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this ends up working out. They were able to trust pretty quickly, and Sam's able to show them, here's how you can get past the wall. The group decides to break up. They're gonna send Rickon on. Rickon's like, "No, I don't want to go." And Bran's like, "You have to. If anything happens to me, you are the heir to the North, to Winterfell." So they're gonna split up the group. It was just a quick scene of everybody meeting each other, all happy for a second. Now we're gonna split everyone up, and they're now going to be 3 different groups going their way from this section at the wall.
Question: Battle Royale. Which side wins?
Of those,
Sam has a sword and dragon glass, and has Gilly, who's a wildling
anymore.
But
He
doesn't have a sword anymore.
The White Walker.
Oh, so he has dragon glass.
The White Walker grabbed it and shattered it. Yeah.
So Sam and Gilly versus a crippled, a twig of a dude, Hodor, and
the direwolf.
How is this even a
Mira
fight?
Reed.
Yeah, Mira is there. How is that even a fight?
Asha.
Just saying.
She's pretty scrappy.
Asha's not there. She's gone.
Asha's not there. But I feel like if you think about it from that vein, Sam's trying to be like, "You should totally come with us." He has no fucking leverage in this conversation. Everyone else on the other side is determined they're going to north the wall. Sam and Gilly have zero leverage in this conversation. They are hostages as soon as they walk in the room. Anyway, to Nick.
Gosh dang it, I have good points in my head, and then as soon as it's to Nick. I was going to point out, I agree with the love of seeing these characters that we're starting to really admire come together in these unique scenes. There's a scene where they're entering up through the sewage pipes, where they're either outside the wall or right after they get out through the wall, where Sam and Gilly are talking, and Gilly turns to him and is like, "You know all of that just from reading marks on paper?" And it's that kind of stuff is so cool. Yeah, you're a wizard. That kind of stuff was so cool because, people who are literate, we take that crap for granted. It's the knowledge we're spitting in a random 2-hour podcast compared to people who can't read. It's like how
Harry, you should
handicapped
learn.
those conversations.
I'm still illiterate.
No,
Still illiterate.
everybody has their strengths. It's such an interesting point I just wanted to make on that note with that such a great comment that, again, poor writing, whatever you want to say, how the writers had that in there where Sam is clearly not the most capable person in these combative affairs, right? But in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. To Gilly, he's a wizard. It's like, how do you know all this stuff? And it's a really cool perspective line. And then the other comment I was going to make too, when we talk about that, when he comes up the pipe, the reason all the characters are fearful of who that may be is because they just had heard that story that we touched on in the previous comment about the Rat King who was forced to eat his own children for the rest of eternity because he let harm befall people who he had deemed under his care in his own home. And so we don't know what's going to happen at this point in the story with the phrase, but clearly bad things happen to people who let harm befall their guests. And so that scene is given that context to that backstory of Bran telling that story to Mira and Jojen, and then it immediately cuts over again to Frey. So I thought that was really poignant. Again, juxtaposition is my word for the night, but yeah, it really highlights that interesting stuff of some bad stuff may happen to them.
I was going to say off Nick's first point about like how Sam is a wizard. Like, I think that scene, if anything, like points out how just poorly written Gilly has become. That they really, I feel like they in the first, when you first introduced her, she seems like she's a knowledgeable character, can start fires, but now it just seems like they just are weakening her as a character as just like oh boy, you're so smart. Oh my gosh, I'm so dumb. Oh my god, I'm so dumb. Like, why don't you make her sound like somebody who is at least knowledgeable of the world? Like, you just make her sound super dumb, like there's no literacy in the North. Like, I just think they're underpowering her as a character. Anyway.
All right, you guys roast.
You go before I go.
Gary.
I will take this spot.
Roast Gary, but save some for me.
You're using the word poorly written completely incorrectly there, Gary. She is a person who grew up north of the wall when there is nothing kind of north of the wall that kind of shows that there should be being like, especially where she grew up, there was she grew up in a family home basically where there was one male in charge who kept all the women subjugated to him and didn't allow them to do anything. So it was just like, what world is she supposed to grow up in there? Is she supposed to be like this master too of like all this knowledge when she grew up in a spot that is just like there's nothing there? So I think using the word poorly written is kind of a poor choice there. She is just a very new person to the world there. Her worldview is basically Craster Keep, and that's about it. She is now learning more about what's going on there. Like, she did not believe Sam when Sam said there's a giant wall made of ice that is 700 feet tall or whatever and stretches for miles basically in both directions there. Steven, throwing it over to you.
Yeah, no, you're talking about a girl who is literally, in our parlance, has been locked in a cage her entire life in the basement of a house that has boarded windows. She doesn't know what trees look like. You can't be surprised when she walks outside and goes, "Holy fuck, is that a car? What does this even do? This is blowing my mind." Yeah, it's weird to us, and we're going, "Well, God, are you dumb?" No, she's not dumb. She's been locked in, like we said, locked in a cage. Her cage is Craster's Keep, but Caster's Creep is basically the same thing. And just stuck there her entire life. I actually think that, and I think we brought this up 3 episodes ago, how well she and when I say compliments, I don't mean, "Oh, you're a wizard, Harry." I mean, actually compliments Sam. in terms of she has a lot of practical knowledge of how to survive, how to build a fire, how to trek through snow, etc., living off the land, things that she might have actually had experience at. And he has a lot of book knowledge. And yeah, to someone who has never seen a computer, it's magic. It what is the all significantly advanced technology is basically magic. Oh my gosh, there's a quote about it.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and that's what she's at right now. Her level of what she has seen is so low. That's not her fault, and that's not the fault of people writing her. That's just everything's magic.
The quote is, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, from Arthur C. Clarke.
Thank you.
Yes. Heard of such a quote. No, yeah, Gary, you're a moron. I was going to say, your comment was, why can't we make her seem more worldly? Yeah, her worldview has literally been the fence around Craster's Keep. It's not that she's dumb. She just doesn't know any different. Like, Sam is spouting off information about the 13 castles on the far side of the wall, probably realistically 50 miles maybe from where she's ever been. And, to say nothing of what the rest of the world south of the wall looks like, she doesn't know. And so, yeah, it's the difference between her wisdom of knowing don't talk back to Craster, how to start a fire, how to skin a goat, how to fetch water, versus his wisdom and intelligence on different things that he's referencing that she's never even heard of. Yeah, and I agree with Tyler and Steven that it's not that it's poor writing or that they're making her sound dumb. It would be like if aliens landed and started talking to us about the sixth dimension. We didn't even know such things were possible, let alone what it would look like. And so anything you would say would sound extremely uneducated.
For the listeners, my headset died, so I missed about half of Steven's ramblings. So now I'm interested. Amanda, do you want to pile on, like, about how I'm a fucking idiot? Like,
it's upsetting to me.
Gilly is a strong, independent fucking woman.
Gary, I will sum it up for you. We're all upset that you insulted Gilly, and we are rising to her defense.
Exactly. Okay, don't you back off, Gilly.
We can move the fuck on. Like, characters who don't fucking matter. I insulted a character who doesn't fucking matter. You can move the fuck on right now.
I'd like to make a motion that the chair recognizes Gilly as Sam's, salvation in this whole story arc.
Seconded.
So I would say that she absolutely matters, and that his adopted child that, is just, he's taken care of, gives him a reason to persevere. Where in previous episodes, we saw him faceplant into the snow and say, leave me here to die. He's got a reason to live now. You back off of Gilly and her quote-unquote
okay, I guess a reoccurring theme, not spoiling anything, is that I am never impressed with Gilly throughout the show. I feel like this will probably come up again. I'll just forget it, and just my standing opinion is I don't think Gilly is portrayed as a smart, worldly individual, and we can leave it at that and move on.
All right. Amanda,
coming from the man who said Helm's Deep was a terrible battle.
I didn't expect this to go in the direction it did, but no, I'm good.
Okay. Gary, what do you got for us there?
I had a note that about Joffrey announcing the news of the Red Wedding, and how Joffrey sort of talks down to Tywin of like, where were you when, my father, and that was another interesting note, is that he, in the small council, still claims, like, everyone in that fucking room knows that Robert Baratheon is not his father. Like, no one, maybe Tywin's oblivious to it, I don't know. But, like, my father, was doing great things while you were hiding at Casterly Rock, and you just sense that, Tywin, just slams the fucking door on him. Anyway,
Yes.
Nick.
I was going to say, you said the word he claims his father, Robert Baratheon. I think Joffrey, for all intents and purposes, believes he is a Baratheon. I don't think he, like you said, everyone kind of knows, yeah, you're not a Baratheon. You're clearly this. All the signs point to this, blonde hair, yada, yada. I don't think Joffrey has put two and two together. Like, it's not like for fear of losing the crown. I just don't think he's like sat and thought because he has that scene earlier in an earlier episode in an earlier season where he talks to his mom and he like asks Cersei outright. He's like, "Is there any truth to this? That like my father had other whatever other relations, or that you were unfaithful?" Like that's all he says. Like he doesn't put two and two together to be like, "Am I really a Baratheon?" So when he says that, he's like, "My father was, while you were hiding on a Castle Rock." He's legit like throwing shade at to everyone else's knowledge that's clearly not founded on reality. And yeah, like you said, Tywin slams the door on him.
And at this point, the true story of like what Jaime did and what Tywin did, and obviously Tywin is not not great in that history story, but he's like. He's not a wuss by any means. Like he's still a great lord of Westeros. Tyler?
Yeah, I was going to say I have that written down too, of just this whole scene of just Joffrey being so giddy that he gets to announce the news of what happened there to everyone. So he gets to be in his eyes, the hero there, the proclaimer of the news that he has won the war. Then he talks
the usurper of the revolution.
There we go. And then he talks to Tywin there, basically. And you can just see in Tywin's eyes, he's like, "You little twerp there, you don't know what you're saying there at all." And then Tywin, proving that he is really the most powerful person in Westeros, sends the king to bed without supper. As Tyrion so famously puts it there.
I real quick wanted to back up, actually, Gary, on the point about I think that Joffrey does know that he is a bastard, and a inbred bastard at that. I believe that is why he embarks on those kind of vicious campaigns of rooting out his father's other bastards. I don't think he'd care as much if it wasn't as personal to him.
He also hold the lion as a sigil still? Like
he does, and that's what I was about to say. He's also very, very attached to the Lannister name, and Lannisters this, Lannisters that. Not attached to the Baratheons. I don't believe he sees himself as a Baratheon, and I think he understands on at least an intellectual level that he is literally a bastard, whatever child.
Or his better side. He thinks his better side is the Lannister side.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, I don't know if maybe it's been fully communicated, but in this scene, do you get some of the how Tywin, what Tywin thinks of Robert Baratheon? That maybe Tywin was really not. He changed sides very late in the revolution, and so does he maybe not think very highly of Robert Baratheon? He just thinks he was the winning side, and he just sort of threw all of his chips under him at the last second. I think we talked about in the last episode about the making a decision based on what's in your best interest, or turning tides and watching your own skin. But anyway, I was just curious if you sense a general disdain for Robert Baratheon.
I think I do, but I think he was mad at the Mad King anyways. There's that too. But I honestly think I also have to disagree with Steven about Joffrey. I think there's big ways we can delude ourselves into believing truths that are not truth. I think there's a chance that Joffrey has realized that he could be not Robert Baratheon's child, that he could be Jaime Lannister's, but I think that's an inconvenient truth, and he is gonna stick to his guns, and because he's the king and no one else is gonna say it to him, like, he's been able to delude himself so far.
It doesn't matter as long he believes, only the truth he believes is that he is the true king. Sorry, Steven, I cut in line.
Oh, that's fine. That's a thing. I was actually gonna riff a little bit on your comment about how, and I was thinking about this, how Tywin changed sides late in the game during the Revolution, right? Do you think he sees a little bit of himself in Roose Bolton, who changed sides a little bit late in the game and allowed for a kind of an underhanded method to get rid of the king in the north? I mean, it seems very similar to me to what Tywin did.
The closest house to the king of the time is the one that turns the tables.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. I think that he admires. Well, I don't know. I don't really think he admires anything. I think he's cold and calculating. I think he recognizes, like, game recognizes game kind of mentality. Like, oh, that's cold and heartless. I respect that. More so than he's like, I see myself in you. I'm going to mold you into something. Because, like, there's no other interaction.
Oh, sure, no.
In the rest of this scene or this episode that we've seen so far, that, like, you know, he reaches out to him and says, "Thank you for all you've done." He just Roose comments that he's to be made in charge of the North or something like that, in the Starks' stead. And so, you know, he's rewarded for the work he did, but that's really it. I guess I don't know. He probably recognizes that he appreciates it because it's an ends to a mean. You know, he's an ends to a means kind of guy. It always justifies, if I'm alive and my family maintains, then whatever happens, whoever dies. I think that's kind of how I see it, at least Tywin's reaction to it.
And I guess I should clarify, I don't particularly even mean that as a compliment. I might mean that as a threat. I mean, what did Tywin end up doing to everybody else after he betrayed his king? Is he ended up basically taking all the power for himself? Might he see? And this is all kind of just a theoretical thing, but the parallels are kind of striking to me, and it makes me wonder what Tywin sees of Roose.
I was going to point out, like, just as my last thoughts on Roose Bolton in this conversation, is that does Roose Bolton know that he could be usurped as the Warden of the North by Sansa's future son? Like, and I guess that maybe that information is probably public, that Sansa has been married to the Imp, because there was a public wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, but I'm sure when the deal was made, he's like, oh, well, I will name you Warden of the North. Small fact you probably don't know is that as soon as my son has a kid, he will take over. You're just keeping the seat warm for me.
Absolutely, that was my whole point entirely, Gary. That he says that in the small council is like, Roose Bolton will hold the position until your child comes of age. So I was just going to say, does he see him as a threat? Maybe long term, but right now, no. He's just his puppet holding his position for him, because he mentions it to Tyrion that's his plan, is to let, you know, Sansa's child be the new Warden of the North, and then having a lineage, it ties it all back under the Lannisters. So maybe he does see him as a threat then in that regard. But I don't think that's a threat that he would ever name as something he's quote unquote concerned with.
All right. I believe we're at you, Gary. Did you have more points?
I had a couple more points. I noted that in the conversation between Tywin and Tyrion, when everyone else left the room, Tywin claims that the greatest sacrifice he's made for his family is letting Tyrion live. Like, that was, I think, a very poignant moment where, like, Tyrion just keeps on beating him. It's like, you've done nothing for family. You're just a selfish son of a bitch. He's like, I've done everything for family. I let you live. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that was as, you know, there's been a couple conversations between the two of them where you definitely sense there's a power struggle, and that Tyrion, every time he's like, I deserve some fucking respect. Like, I won the siege on the Capitol, and he's like, "No, you didn't. Like, you don't deserve to be the Lord of Casterly Rock." And now he's gone even lower to say, like, "You don't even deserve to live. Like, this is my sacrifice for family, is letting you keep your life." Like, basically a blind threat that if you step out of line, I will kill you. Nick?
I think that there's, again, sort of the I touched on earlier tonight, the deepening of these characters, or maybe the true showing of these characters, or the things that they have done that we as an audience member, or in this case, like you're talking about, Gary, some of these characters don't even know that they've done for each other. Tyrion only sees the horror that his father has done. He's like, name one thing of love you've done. And yeah, it's like, I let you live. It's like, oh crap, yeah, how different would the world have been if Tyrion hadn't been in it these last 20 or whatever years? And the Kingslayer, yeah, he's this horrible person, and he's Oathbreaker, what all the horrible things he said he's been called, but how many lives have you saved? 500,000. It's like the true perspective of what these characters have done and the parts that they've played even in their earlier lives before this show even started. It's really set the stage for when these conversations happen. It's like a dead halt in your tracks, because yeah, Tyrion's winning that conversation. He's got his dad pinned to rights about what a terrible person he's done, and he murdered people at this wedding. It's like, that's difficult. And like, I had a question at one point earlier tonight I was going to ask about this conversation. Is Tywin even, like, I don't think he would care one way or the other, but he's asking, he's like, do you disapprove to Tyrion? I don't think he's actually asking for a response. I think it's rhetorical. But the way he asks it, I wonder if Tyrion had said, yeah, I don't disapprove, would he have been like, well, that's unfortunate, but it still happened. It's like these characters have these moments of horror and the things they've done to each other, and they've hurt and maimed one another's families. Like, the reason they're doing that is because of all these things that they've done before too. And so that's a really, against Gary's Rolodex of points there, I think that there's a really well-written character in the poorly written story, if that makes sense.
All right.
Definitely the Joffrey, the Capitol storyline is always been a little better acted and better written. I mean, the Capitol storyline has Stephen's hero, Pod for King.
Yes,
it has
does.
Tyrion, who, if you know anything about the show, you'd know that the cover art for every season included Tyrion, like, after season 2. Like, every single poster, like, or box art for the DVD set included Tyrion. I think maybe not maybe it was season 3. I'd have to go rip them out, but I know Tyrion became a lot more prevalent in the marketing based on how good of an actor it is portraying him.
Absolutely.
And I guess I gotta agree with that as well. I think that in that, like, little, if as Gary likes to call it, a bottle, if you want to call it that, they had some great actors. The guy who plays Tywin plays it to a T. Obviously, Tyrion. I forget the name who plays Tyrion. He's a famous actor in and of himself. Yeah, Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage.
He is a fantastic actor in and of himself. The actress who plays what's her name?
Cersei.
Cersei. Yes.
Lena Headey.
Great actress in and of herself, but also the actress who plays Marjorie is already been in a couple movies. Great actress in and of herself.
Natalie Dormer.
Yes. I mean, you're talking these are the A cast. These aren't the people that they kind of picked up off the street. This is the A cast.
With the exception, as you talk about the A cast, is behind the scenes. Cersei Lannister is never in a scene with Bronn, because in real life, those two were married and went through a very ugly divorce.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I can back that story up.
I'm interested.
Wow.
That too.
Can?
Tyler agrees with me, guys.
I did not know that.
Neither did I. Interessant.
Was that something that was like? Is that something intentional?
Yeah, I think it was very well known that they did not each other.
I'll do this, but I will never be in a scene with him.
You can work around that with cinematography pretty easily.
Mhm.
I know that the Hero of the Revolution gets a name. We already talked about that. Ygritte.
Ygritte.
I made a note. You guys fucking mock it, but like I think she's trying to portray her feelings because like I don't think she says a fucking word in this episode. Like I think Jon has to apologize, and Jon is literally saying all these things. I was like, I'm sorry, I had to do it. And she's just standing there stoically of like, and Jon says, you're not going to shoot me. Like, I love you. I know you love me, and I know I love you, and you're not going to shoot me, but I have to do this. And then as soon as he turns his back, first shot, and then he runs, second shot, he gets on the horse, and she gets a third shot in. Like, awful proof that I think they're just trying to portray her emotions, because I don't doubt that she could have killed Jon with killed or slowed and not allowed him to escape with any of those shots. But she is just trying to like give him the pain of like how she feels. Like she feels so betrayed. Also, while rewatching it, my other I don't know. What's that theory? Random theory. Is she shooting him so that he has a story when he gets back to the wall? Because obviously he has to tell. I don't know. Maybe he not trying to spoil when it happens, but he has to tell the story of how he got south of the wall. Like he left through one door of Castle Black and he came back through a different door. Like there's a story there. So is she just helping his conspiracy theory? That's what I was thinking. Is my random conspiracy theory is she selling Jon's story? Because other than the arrows, like he came away pretty and sparkling.
I wish I could believe that, but knowing the future, I don't think that's true.
I don't think that she's, like you said, she's very distraught. She's going through a bunch of different emotions. I don't think she's thinking that far ahead to give him an alibi. I think that you had a comment in there, Gary, about I think that she's hurting him to make him feel that pain. I don't know if she's doing it to make him feel that pain. I think she's just trying to hurt him. But you are absolutely right. She could easily take him out. Like she shot a deer when Jon was like, that's too far out, you'll scare him. And she like winks like, no, I got this. And then we see they shoot the deer. Like there's moments where we know she's an excellent shot. And if she really wanted to screw him over, she'd shoot the horse, not Jon, because then he ain't going nowhere, and she could easily take him out. So it is just hurting him because he is the focal point of where her anger needs to go. I don't think it's hurting him because she wants him to feel hurt. Like you said, I think it's that shot puppy face from that previous episode where he can't believe he left her. And like you said, it's not until he again turns to leave her that she's like, you jackass, and she shoots him. Because she does say one thing. She says her iconic line, you know nothing, Jon Snow. I forget what he says to prompt her with it. But then he replies back, I know I love you, and I know that you love me. He's like, but I have to go. And that's when he turns to leave. Like, he doesn't want to leave. He does love her, and she obviously cares for him. But it's when he yet again abandons her in her eyes that she does shoot him in the back. And, knowing enough about hunting, if you hit his spine, like, he can't walk. And so she's just maybe that distraught that she's not really aiming as well as she could. She's not trying to not hit him. She's either just fighting through emotions or, not level-headed, calm enough mentally to fire well.
I think she's just expressing her emotions. She needs to shoot him. She needs to punch him.
Giving domestic abuse victims.
Oh, no.
If he was within walking distance, he would have gotten kicked in the dick and probably kicked while he was down. Like, she's fucking pissed. Like, she's just expressing emotion. This is how people communicate in a very poor manner in domestic abuse situations.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I think that she is to your credit, Gary, I will concede she is certainly trying to work through her feelings, because there's never been a Jon Snow in her life before. Right? The other people have either been jerks that she's probably killed or have left her, or people who weren't worth her time. She's never met someone who's clearly her I was about to say her superior, but like civilly, knowledge intellectually her superior. She is clearly more versed than Jon is in a lot of things. She's completely infatuated with him, definitely has emotions that she's trying to work through. And yeah, to look up to him, to say several times, it's you and me and you, I love you, you love me, yeah, I love you too. And then he's abandoned her twice in her eyes. She's just beside herself and just loosing those arrows to, like, she's trying to get rid of her emotions, maybe, metaphorically.
Anyone have any notes on that? Otherwise, my last note was on the closing scene. And I didn't know if, like, when you see the giant crowd, last scene of the episode, if it's supposed to resemble an eye or a butthole. Like,
those are two totally
I didn't feel like
things.
anyone was listening. Like, Tyler's looking at his keyboard, Steven's looking at his keyboard. I'm like, I don't know.
I was listening.
Yeah,
I have a question for you, though, Gary.
I hear every noise that comes out of your mouth, unfortunately.
Anyway, was that supposed to be symbolism? That was my question. Like, really a true question. Well, like, is it supposed to? It looked like an eye, or is it just a bunch of people that's circling her? Nick,
I would say symbolism in the fact that she is the center of this world in Slaver's Bay. Like, she has been to Karth, Astapor, Yunkai now. Like, she's just like Rob, never lost a battle that she's come up against or a challenge that she hasn't overcome, either through pretty much just the strength of her dragons or the strength of her army, through force. And so she is the center of this world, and people idolize her. As I think they said that the Unsullied said Misa means mother, someone who is revered, someone who's
name of the episode, Nick.
Yeah, has someone that has their best interest in heart. And so, the what is it? The power of the many will always outweigh the power of the few, or something like that. That there's clearly a whole bunch of slaves in Slaver's Bay that they all raise her up. And as the screen pans out, we see, again, a symbolism of she is the center of this universe, the strength and swelling of her numbers from all these slaves who back her and think she's doing well. But also the strength of how she's getting those victories. You see the dragons flying around.
I will say that I think there was a little bit of symbolism, but I don't think it was physical symbolism in the way that you were thinking, Gary. I think it is the way in what Nick's thinking. And I think I don't think it's necessarily the center of their universe. I think it's more of God worship at that point. Misa, calling her the mother. And they're going and they're praying to her, and this is some freaky, weird cult shit going on. And the start of some weird complexes. I shouldn't say the start, the continuance of some weird complexes that go on with that girl that are not helped by people worshiping her as a god.
I'm hearing some hate on Daenerys.
This was one of the things, actually, I was going to bring up, if no one else did, because this scene is the first time I remember I watched it with Amanda. The first time I watched this, I was like, oh, this is creepy. This is really weird and creepy. And that struck me on the first time. That struck me on the second time. It's weird. It is to see this person who, yes, has dragons and is just torching people as a god it sees that she can do no wrong. Sees that she is the creator of all good. There's a very weird scene to me, and a scene that I don't like. Just because I don't like the character, not because I don't like the scene itself. I don't like the character, and I don't like what this is setting up.
Gary made me think of this, actually, when you pointed out the scene. Well, with Gary's descriptive ways of describing it, of course. But, like, I don't remember this kind of thing in the book, but this is not the first time that the show has shown like this kind of circle and pattern. Like you see, they literally used the White Walkers to display the corpses in the same manner. I don't remember being in the book. It's interesting that the TV show has done that, and that's kind of a weird parallel to make between Daenerys and
The White Walkers, because
there.
she's bringing devastation, is what she's doing.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
All right, on to Gary.
I was going to point out on Steven's point about the beginning. I think it's really the beginnings of like fascism, like very scary, like altogether allegiance. And then the reason I originally raised my hand was because Nick butchered a fucking famous movie quote, and it bugged the shit out of me. And that is, the actual movie quote is, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one."
Fuck.
Star Trek: Wrath of Khan.
It's
I know
Spock.
that. That wasn't what I was
3.
referencing.
Dark Side of the Moon.
That is-
Oh, now you can get out of here. Now, you know what? Tyler has been kicked from the chat. That's what's happening.
That is
It's actually
a
reversed
quote
in that
from
movie,
Star Wars.
too. Star Trek.
That is what that's from, but that wasn't what I was referencing, because I said something else about it's a political reference. It's not a humanitarian reference, is what I was going for. There is a political reference. I'll have to look for it, but it's not the needs of the many in the political reference quote. It's something to the extent of there's always more power. The people don't recognize how much power they have versus the people who have the people in power or have as much power as the power of the people. Something to that effect. My point, I was going to say originally, gosh dang it, I'm losing my point here, Gary, in reference to Wrath of Khan. Was to Steven's point about the God complex. I think she is high on her own supply, like, you know, being lifted up and praised and seen as, like you were referencing too. I was thinking more just like the maternal Issa mother figure, but as like the mother of all existence, maybe, that Steven might have been alluding to. I think she's a little high on that supply. I think that she's liking this view that everybody worships her. I mean, there's a difference between thank you, you know, I appreciate your praise, you know, I'm just doing what I can to help you out, which is how she may have started, but she does have a little bit of that, especially at the end of this episode. I don't necessarily foresee at this point in the story anything bad in her future, but I think that she definitely has the potential for it. Like I've talked about, you know, the Wrath of Dragons. I think there's a reference too somebody makes about earlier on. We talked about whenever Targaryen's born, the gods flip a coin on whether or not they're going to be good or horribly dangerous and evil. And I think that she has that potential in her. We've seen her being a little cocky lately, or a little bit more arrogant with her dragons, getting older and more violent. Yeah, to be worshipped, to be revered, to be loved, to be, you know, thanked and appreciated. That's something she's never had. You go back again, these characters, when we first were introduced with her with Viserys, that was never something we would have imagined for her. So absolutely, this is something that she's wanting to keep going as long as she can. And yeah, people sometimes who get disillusioned that way can lead to doing some pretty terrible atrocities.
I will say the problem with the show here in this part, and there, Gary, you can say poor writing here for this part, or it's more of a poor direction too, of like Daenerys is still continued to be portrayed as the hero of her side of the story there. Every time you see this, she is the hero. She is liberating all of these people who were enslaved. She is, you know, righting the wrongs of injustices we feel upon society there. So she's obviously being portrayed as the hero and everything like that. But yeah, like she definitely, if you sit there and stop and then start thinking about it a little bit further, like, yeah, she burned an entire city to the ground there basically to get her army and then left the city defenseless. Yeah, she sacked, wrong wording, but sacked a city there to free the slaves there, and now has all of these people fawning over her, which is only inflating her ego more. So just like Rob there, she's kind of getting her ego inflated more and more with each successful thing that she's having, never really understanding what comes along with defeat, or what comes along with making the wrong choice and having it be a negative consequence to your actions there. Steven.
My statement was just going to be that you couldn't see her becoming a horrible person in the same way that you couldn't see the Son of Sam becoming a horrible person after he was killing animals. It was after that, like, I saw this and I was just like, this is weird. She's weird. She melted her brother's head and just kind of smiled about it at one point. We all laughed. She burnt down cities and we all laughed because, haha, they deserved it. And this is just getting... This is kind of... I don't want to say a tipping point because I think this has all been leading up to it. I think the signs are there. I think that the direction is there. I don't think this is a bend in her arc because everyone's adorating her. I believe this is her arc. This is who she is. She is unbalanced. She is a Targaryen.
I guess my point was, like, we talked about in the last episode how they kind of took some narrative shortcuts into, like, cutting out a bunch of battle, and, like, they just came out as like, we won. I kind of, when Tyler said about, poor writing, I feel like it kind of continued in this episode where, like, they just took the shortest narrative path to get to the next step.
Not to cut in front of you there, Nick. It's not poor writing, in my opinion. It's more poor direction. They don't have the forethought looking out into the future of, like, how is this going to impact, like, how is this going to play out? Right now, Dany is being shown as the hero of everything. Is that how this is going to play out in the end?
Anyway, I was just saying that, like, think about how much setup they made and how many additional scenes they had before the Red Wedding. Like, they just spent more time with Robb Stark, and I kind of am getting the sense that, like, you only kind of, like, dip your toes in Daenerys' story, and they don't really spend that much time, money, or intellectual thought into her storyline. Like, it's, I don't know, like, it's very... They're telling the story, but they're kind of sort of doing it in the, like, least impressive, least character... I feel like the people around her have better storyline or better narrative development than she does. Like, she's just sort of like a background character of her own story. I don't know. Nick?
My first response was going to be, there's another classic quote that says, "We are always the hero of our own story." And so, absolutely, I think Daenerys sees herself as the hero of who she is, just like everybody does. Tywin thinks he's the hero of his own story, right? I'm successfully keeping my family alive and securing our legacy. But then also, yeah, I think that the potential is there for the tipping point that Stephen was talking about. I don't know. I feel like, yes, Gary, we have not had as many scenes with Daenerys. Like, even when this show starts, we're introduced to the Starks in, like, the first 2 or 3 episodes, and it's not until, like, the third one or halfway through the second episode that we meet this random Daenerys across the sea. She's almost so far removed from the rest of the characters' stories in Westeros on the other side of the Narrow Sea that she's dangerous, but she's not really a threat. Like, she's in Slaver's Bay, right? Like, her intent is to try and steal back the Iron Throne as a Targaryen. It's not really anything that she's even close to doing. So she's something other characters may be aware of, but she's not really a threat at this point. So there's not as much screen time for her. There's much more scheming going on in Westeros. But as far as Steven's arc of who her character is, I think this is who she is. Someone who has, like all of us have both light and dark inside of us, not to get too existential. I think that right now she is perceived as the hero of her story for what she's doing as far as liberating these people. Again, do the means justify the ends? Not always, but she's, freeing a whole bunch of people. That's a good point. As I was saying that in my mind, I jumped to... Oh, who the heck says that saying? One of the characters has a line about, what is one... Stannis Baratheon with Melisandre talking to Davos. What is one boy's life against an entire kingdom? Right? talking about what they're doing and torturing Gendry when they're talking about him in the cell and whatnot. That's the whole premise here, right? What is a couple dead maesters if you save the rest of the slaves in an entire city? Is Daenerys a terrible person? Depends on your perspective. She doesn't think she's a terrible person. She thinks she's doing the greatest good that's ever been done in Slaver's Bay in the history of forever. So it's interesting to see where she will go. I don't think she's the best perfect person, but I also don't know if she's the worst one ever.
I was just going to say, I just realized we didn't talk about Stannis or Davos at all. I mean, blah,
Travesty.
blah. Life goes
Davos.
on. Anyway, to you, Steven.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Nick is wrong. She's objectively a horrible person. Yeah, she's saving Warsaw, Nick. She's saving Warsaw by shelling it to get the Nazis out.
Okay, that's Tyler. That is all of my items. We can move on to the next person.
Did you have anything you wanted to discuss further?
No, we've talked about a couple different items there. I think that I'm just gonna end with what I said. I think that each of these characters foresees themselves as the best person that they could possibly be. I don't think anyone thinks they're doing anything wrong.
Or you could say they think they're the hero of the revolution.
There's only one hero of the revolution, and he's a horrible son of a bitch.
That is a true statement.
Steven, do you have anything you'd like to discuss?
No, I do not have anything I would like to discuss.
Okay, I have one final point to close on here. It might be open for a discussion here. So Varys has a conversation with Shay. They're basically trying to shoo Shay basically out of King's Landing to basically help Tyrion focus more on being a active participant in saving the realm there. And Shay ends up rejecting it because she thinks it comes from Tyrion, and if Tyrion wanted her out, he could just tell her himself. My question is, was it Tyrion or was it Varys who did this? Was it Varys who acted upon this, or was it Tyrion who asked Varys to basically initiate this? Steven.
All right, so I don't believe that this was Tyrion asking Varys to do this. I do believe this was Varys' own initiative, because I believe Varys really much wants to save the kingdom. And secondly, I just don't think that this is how Tyrion would go about getting Shay out of the kingdom. I don't think he would go to Varys. I don't think he trusts Varys that much to do it. And I just think at this point, Varys is looking at the Empire. He's looking at the distractedness of some of the people and saying, not bros before hoes, but empires before hoes at this point.
My theory is that I actually agree with Steven. Like, I think Varys is doing this for himself. Because I think, Varys just wants what's best for the kingdom. And he doesn't want to do anything bitterly. Like, he's very nice to Sansa and claims Sansa is kind of a victim of what's best for the Empire. But he, I don't. It's not that he necessarily doesn't trust. They don't trust one another. They respect each other greatly. Varys and Tyrion. It's just Tyrion has already said his piece. I think Varys is just trying to sort of save her from the inevitable heartache that she's going to go through, because Varys, what's best for the kingdom is that that she disappear and Tyrion, mend some fences with Sansa and make the new baby of the North. Also, I think that Shay is a secret spy, but
Already?
Can't be proven. I don't think it's ever proven. I think she's a secret spy.
Yeah.
She's a secret spy. Maybe she's
Wrong,
a spy for the
but-
hero of the revolution.
No.
All right, good point there. Anyone have anything else to kind of add or want to talk about? No, getting silence from everybody here.
Let's sneak this
I've-
thing like Theon.
Too soon, Nick. Too soon. All right.
Sorry to cut that short.
For next episode, we're moving into
Oh, it's really funny.
we're moving into season 4, episode 1, Two Swords, episode 2, The Lion and the Rose. More good stuff coming up here. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you have a good one.
Bye, everybody. Good luck. We'll see you next season.